The first mention came from a fan page that reposted two blurry screenshots from someone's story, one of the indoor space, dimly lit, all marble and warm light, and one of a long table set for a private event, where RM could be seen seated near the end. The tag was vague, something about an art foundation, but that wasn't the part fans focused on. The issue was the girl, not famous, not tagged, seated directly beside him. Too close, some said, considering the seating wasn't random. Others pointed out there were still empty chairs, even though the event had started. The angle made it hard to see what they were doing, but what made people uneasy was the stillness. RM wasn't walking around, greeting anyone, or looking toward cameras like others in the room. He just sat there, next to her. The same girl appeared in both photos, and in neither did she speak to anyone else. That was enough. The thread started quietly. One fan asked, "Is this really recent?" Another replied, "The guy 2 seats over posted it yesterday." A third added, "But why is he just sitting there like that?" It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was too static, too intentional looking for comfort, especially for someone who usually never stays in one place too long at events like this. The comment that pushed it over came late. He could have sat anywhere. No one replied for almost an hour. Then came, but he didn't. The second photo had better lighting. Someone had zoomed in and lightened it. Maybe not even maliciously at first, just trying to see more. The result was clearer than expected. RM sitting at the same spot, the girl still beside him, her hand resting on the table, his arm not far from it. The table was long enough that they didn't have to be next to each other, but they were. Comments turned defensive fast. "It's just seating," one wrote. "Maybe the host placed them there." But another pointed out the playlist in the background, jazz, low volume, and the lack of any formal presentation. "It's not that kind of event," they said. "People moved around, just not them." A separate thread picked up a second detail. A staff member walked past at some point, bringing drinks, and RM turned, not to thank the server, but to say something quietly to her. No audio, just posture, leaning slightly in. She responded, barely shifting in her seat. "That," fans said, "is when it stopped looking like coincidence." The tension wasn't about the interaction. It was about the setting. The camera was across the room. The person filming wasn't hiding. It was clear that some phones were out. Yet RM didn't change seats, didn't shift away, didn't glance at the camera. And that's what people couldn't stop circling back to. "If he noticed the phone and still stayed," someone wrote, "then this wasn't accidental closeness. It was chosen." Most replies disagreed, but none could explain why. With so many other places to sit, he hadn't moved even once. The debate shifted when someone reposted a story from a makeup artist who had worked the event. It wasn't meant to draw attention, just a quick boomerang of the venue during setup. But in the reflection of a glass partition, RM and the girl were already sitting, early, before most guests arrived. That changed the tone. "So he didn't just end up next to her," one fan posted. "They were there before anyone else?" Others rushed to say it could have been rehearsal, coordination, even reserved seating. But a few zoomed in on the timestamp, 40 minutes before the official start. "Why be early to a closed event?" one asked, "if not for a reason?" A strange silence followed. Not everyone wanted to ask that question. A small clip surfaced next, brief, unfocused, clearly accidental. Someone had tried to record the decor, but caught the girl standing up. She reached for her bag under the table. RM shifted slightly, making space. They didn't speak, but there was a small motion, her hand lightly touching the edge of his chair as she passed behind. It wasn't a gesture meant for an audience, and that's what made it worse. "Too quiet to be performance," someone posted. "Too natural to be neutral." A thread popped up, arguing it could still be nothing. But by then, it wasn't about the girl. It was about the lack of distance. One fan wrote, "It's not that he sat next to someone. It's that he didn't treat it like something people would notice." And they did. The comments weren't angry, just unsettled. The phrase that kept returning was simple. He could have waited. Part 4 began not with a new image, but with a deletion. The original post that had started the speculation, the one with the two blurry photos, disappeared overnight. No explanation, no message, just gone. That only made it worse. Someone reposted it with the caption, "Too late to pretend we didn't see it." Within minutes, newer photos surfaced, from a different angle, further back. They showed the same setup, but this time more people were present. The room was softly lit, informal, the kind of curated intimacy that suggested exclusivity without performance. RM was still seated at the end of the table, the girl still beside him. But what changed everything was a small moment caught mid-frame. He leaned back slightly, she adjusted in her chair, and their movements were timed. Not rehearsed, but familiar. Not overt, but not hesitant either. They moved like two people used to sharing space, even if in silence. That's when the tone of discussion fractured. One group insisted this was nothing. Body language misread, frames too selective, context missing. Another group wasn't sure anymore. If it was a coincidence, one comment read, why does it keep holding shape from every angle? A fan account tried to explain the table arrangement using event seating norms, even diagrammed it, but had to admit that most other guests had reshuffled chairs over the course of the evening, except them. The real fracture came when a behind-the-scenes photo was uploaded by someone who worked at the venue. A wide shot, casual. But on a far wall, in the reflection of a glass door, the girl could be seen arriving through a side entrance, not with the main guests. And behind her, just seconds later, RM stepped in the same way. Not together, not interacting, but close enough in timing that the question re-emerged, sharper than before. Why that entrance? Why before everyone else? Why that seat? And why stay there? The replies came fast. He could have used the main entrance. He could have joined the others later. He could have moved once the room filled. But he hadn't. And every time someone tried to rationalize it, the same discomfort returned. Not because of what was visible, but because of what wasn't hidden. One fan summed it up simply. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And it was made in a room where we were always going to see it. By the next evening, the conversation was no longer contained. What had begun as a quiet thread on a fan forum had spread to wider circles, private group chats, side accounts, even non-fan spaces. Not because anyone claimed to know what happened, but because no one could answer a single question that now echoed louder than all others. Why here? Why like this? A new angle appeared, this time from a design account that had posted photos of the venue's setup. Elegant floor work, minimal table decor, personalized name cards. In one zoomed crop, fans spotted two placards next to each other. Namjoon, and one name that didn't match any known public figure. It wasn't confirmation. It wasn't denial. It was worse. It made the decision look official, intentional. A thread tried to reframe the situation. What if it was just a networking dinner? But the replies didn't follow. Too many had seen the way he sat. Not performative, not avoidant, just present. And in that presence, too much, too long, too still. Someone compiled a timeline of other guests, showing who arrived when, who moved around, who took photos. RM was the outlier. He didn't circulate. He didn't speak to others on camera. He remained exactly where the conversation couldn't help but circle back to. The unease wasn't jealousy. It wasn't scandal. It was spatial, locationally wrong, socially mistimed. One user wrote, he didn't do anything, but he also did not do anything. And that's the part we can't shake. By now, the original posters had locked their profiles. Some tweets were deleted. A few fan sites issued statements asking people not to jump to conclusions. But the screenshots lived on. The reflections, the seating chart, the silent frame where she passed behind his chair. Someone uploaded a slowed-down version of the clip, her fingers brushing the chair, his slight adjustment, and set it to no music. Just room noise. The sound of a party where everything looked calm, and yet nothing felt neutral anymore. One fan, quiet for days, wrote only, he didn't have to leave. He just had to not be there already. That was the fracture. Not her, not closeness, but the time and place he chose to exist inside. The last comment pinned in the thread read, he could have stood. He didn't. And that's all we'll ever get.